make you who you need to be. And he was a propaganda artist for the government during World War I and continued through the 20th century working for corporate establishment America. He said this. He's a nephew of Sigmund Freud, okay? So they knew the individual psyche through Freud's work. He is interested in the mass mind. And he said, if we understand the mechanism and motives of the group mind, is it not possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without their knowing about it? So he actually said that. That's why I told you, if I would have said that, you would have been like, maybe, I don't know. Maybe people are more suspicious these days than they used to be. When I was a classroom teacher, or when I was in a master's program, positing notions of social science that kind of mirror this, I was sort of, I don't want to make it too dramatic, but academically persecuted is what you'd call it if you were into that, sort of thing, because it was not allowed. Like, we don't do that kind of thing around here, young Scott Ritsema. But I would just quote these guys, and I would do this to my public school students. I was teaching public school before I was even Seventh-day Adventist, quoting Edward Bernays, quoting the founders of modern public schooling. That's a whole other seminar we don't get to do today. Oh man, the origins of that industrial era education to create compliant factory workers. Back to Prussia, it was for creating well-drilled soldiers as well, so they wouldn't be humiliated like they were by Napoleon. There's a whole history there. It goes back to Jesuit forms of education, which is the contrary, the competitor to God's true education. So I'd love to do true education seminar, but we're not doing that. We're just doing the media guys. Here's what Bernays says next. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses. Okay, we're going to manipulate consciously and intelligently the masses' habits and opinions. And he says this is an important element in democratic society. Now, I told you guys I was a history teacher, right? So I teach about civic history, constitution, government, economics, all these things. That's one of the most undemocratic things that you've ever heard, isn't it? We're gonna totally control everybody. But why would he say it's a feature of a democratic society? Well, think about this. Behind the Iron Curtain, or in Nazi Germany, or in any authoritarian system for the generations past, the centuries past, the system was usually brute force. It was compulsion. It was intimidation. It was conquest. You come to free societies, and that's not allowed because you have the ballot box, institutionalized revolution, bloodless. And so that what they say is, okay, how do we control the people then? Because that's a foregone conclusion. That's the assumption. That's the prerequisite. We must control the people somehow, say the power elite throughout history. In a democratic society, we don't have brute force as a tool in our tool bag. So we must be messing with their heads in this way. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed. Our minds molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. That's a wake-up call when I shared that with people 20 years ago who were not used to thinking about the world this way. It sounds far-fetched, but I didn't come up with it. It's these guys saying this is what we are doing, and Bernays is no small fry. He is a major player, the most significant player in the development of public propaganda in America in the 20th century. Now, interestingly, we saw alluded to in the spirit of prophecy a method that Satan could use that's even more direct in its control, and it's called mesmerism. Through the channel of mesmerism, Satan comes more directly to the people of this generation and works with that power which is to characterize his efforts when? Near the close of probation. When is that? Right now. We should expect then, if we believe in the source, to see happening in our world today some forms of literal, actual hypnosis, mesmerism, mind control. This is a text on modern hypnosis, how it takes place, and it's using light and sound frequencies to alter the brain state, the state of consciousness. Light and sound frequency of flashing light, perhaps, might alter our state of consciousness. Maybe there's something to this graphic these people came up with. When you're in a beta wave state right now, you're thinking, you're evaluating, the moral filter is up, frontal lobe is engaged. When you slip down into an alpha state, it's a lower, slower brain wave frequency, and it's like the moral filter comes down, and New Age meditation tries to self-hypnotize in this manner. Well, psychophysiologist Thomas Mulholland found that after just 30 seconds of watching television, the brain begins to produce alpha waves. Now, why does that happen? Flash, 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 flash. Have you ever noticed there's a new image on the screen like every 2 seconds? If you listen to our old Media on the Brain that we recorded 12 years ago, I will say it's every 3 seconds. Well, about 3 years into that, somebody came up to me at one of my seminars. He's like, hey, I'm in the industry. The industry standard is now new frame of reference every 2 seconds. Now, that was like 9 years ago. I don't know what it is now, but it's like if you're driving down the road and through a neighborhood in a dark, December evening, emanating from the living rooms of America is this dystopian blue glow, and it's going flash, 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 flash like that. And like this is actually changing our brains in a literal physiological way. It produces alpha waves, which indicates torpid, almost comatose rates of activity. Alpha brain waves are associated with unfocused, overly receptive states of consciousness. I should note that the goal of hypnotists is to induce slow brainwave states. Alpha waves are present during the light hypnotic state used by hypnotherapists for suggestion therapy. Viewers automatically enter a trance state while watching television. Did you know that when you're consuming entertainment media, you are undergoing suggestion therapy, according to the scientific research? And according to Edward Bernays, you are having your group mind controlled and you don't even know about it. Your tastes are being formed. Your habits are being governed and suggested by people you've never heard of in corporate America. This is a video clip that I'm not going to show you, but it's Mark J. Ryan. His name is Mark J. Ryan. It's on the Media on the Brain full seminar. Did I tell you guys this morning that we are trying to take 5-part Media Mind seminar this morning and condense it down to 1 hour? And a 6-part Media on the Brain and condense it down to 1 hour? I've never done both in one short day. So that's why we're moving so fast. And I'm not showing the clip. I don't actually normally show this one because it's on there, 8 minutes. You can watch it. But it's this professional hypnotist. And he gets up and he says, I just got back from watching the best movie I've ever seen. It's called Inception. And the reason this was such an amazing movie is because the filmmakers deliberately hypnotized the viewers, using hundreds of methods of deliberate hypnosis to heal your inner child, to plant wonderful things in you that are going to germinate. And I'm like, whoa, this guy's got my attention. Professional hypnotist, he knows his craft, he knows what he sees. And he's saying they used hundreds of methods, not beyond just the rapid frame of reference where it's like, your brain doesn't know how to make a coherent narrative out of this image, that image, this image, that image. It's just kind of all flashing at you. It's like, I give up. Go into alpha. Feed me a worldview. But no, what he's talking about is not just the flashing. He's talking about deep hypnosis methods, hundreds that they used in one film. And then he says this was the best movie I've ever seen because it was doing wonderful things within you. By the way, we don't believe in this, right? This is Satan's methods. He says, though, all Hollywood studios are doing the same thing as they did in this movie. Wow. But most of that is nefarious, and so I don't even watch TV and movies anymore. Maybe 1 or 2 hours the past 2 or 3 years I've watched something. And I definitely don't watch the commercials because those are especially deliberately and nefariously hypnotic. That's Mark J. Ryan, hypnosis specialist. When you go to the music industry, this is a musicologist who said rock-style music bypasses the frontal lobe and our ability to reason and make judgments about it. This music, speaking of rock music, like television, can produce a hypnotic effect. And the musicians themselves even knew it. Music is a spiritual thing of its own, said Jimi Hendrix. You can hypnotize people with the music, and you can get them at their weakest point and preach into the subconscious what you want to say. This is a musicologist also. He says music can trigger a flood of human emotions and images that have the ability to instantaneously produce very powerful changes in emotional states. Take it from a brain guy. In 25 years of working with the brain, I still cannot affect a person's state of mind the way that one simple song can. And that can be used for good in worship with sacred music, with truth and elevated thoughts to heavenly experience. But the industry is not using it that way, of course. God's methods are always going to be counterfeited by Satan's methods. And Satan will co-opt it in a way where our thoughts are negated. What do I mean by that? Have you read 1 Corinthians 14? Paul was dealing with the Corinthian Christians who were getting wild. And he said, you know what? When you're going to sing and when you're going to pray, you need to sing with your understanding and with your spirit. You need to pray with your spirit and your understanding. And the industry that has turned off our thinking, bypassing our frontal lobe, has reduced the thinking or understanding and only enhance the feeling, the emotional experience of it. God made us full beings, emotional and rational, so they both have their place, but the world wants to negate the thinking and have only the emotional experience. In fact, the founder of MTV put it this way. He said, at MTV, the strongest appeal you can make is emotionally. If you can get their emotions going, make them forget their logic, you've got them. That's quite an admission. I'm telling you, you got to hear it from these guys, because I could tell you that, but I'm just coming up with a theory. They're saying this is what we are doing. At MTV, we don't shoot for the 14-year-olds, we own them. Wow, that's a pretty in-your-face thing to 14-year-olds to hear. I hope they're listening and take this to heart. But music that does this, even if it has Christian lyrics to it, is still going to turn off the prefrontal cortex and the thinking, rational beta waves experience of a fully functional brain. That's what these guys studied at University of Pennsylvania. They got people going to the charismatic style worship with the ecstatic feeling and the rock music and all of that. And they found prefrontal cortex off in that scene of so-called worship, so-called music. Do you know what the word music means? What does it mean to muse? To muse about something means to ponder it, to think about it, to reflect on it, to muse. So music ought to enhance both feeling, because there's feeling in the song. Music is an emotional form of mode of expression, and that's beautiful and wonderful when it's sacred, when it's proper, when sacred music is filled with joy and with reverence. When so-called sacred music is degraded to the world and it communicates anger and sexual expressions, which the top musicologist in the world, Manfred Kleins, said, you Christians in your churches don't understand the music you're playing. Yikes. Whew, man. But I'm telling you, when we have the music truly musing, then it's real. If there's no musing happening, if it's shutting down thought and only an ecstatic emotional experience, then it's not music anymore. It's a counterfeit, because there's no musing happening. Now, by the way, this can happen through like rhythmic elements, like William Ora talks about. He's like, we discovered things that people knew eons ago. So long ago, people have been using heavily rhythmic music to alter states of consciousness, as Mickey Hart says. He's a drummer for the Grateful Dead. He says, everywhere you look around the world, so this is vastly multicultural. Everywhere you look around the world, people are using drums to alter consciousness. I have discovered, along with many others, the extraordinary power of music, particularly percussion, to influence the human mind and body. So it's going to alter consciousness. Interesting. So that's what they're doing in those pagan tribal musical settings with the heavily rhythmic drumming type of so-called worship. It's pagan worship, altering the brain and even opening up for demonic influence, as you know about with voodoo and so on. But that's the music. I want to go back to Hollywood. Bertrand Russell tells us perhaps the most important of all the modern agents of propaganda is the cinema. Now, you thought the cinema was entertainment. Oh, it's just big business. It's just making money entertaining us, right? He's like, nope, not just that. It is perhaps the most important of all the modern agents of propaganda. Cinema, movies, Hollywood, or we might say Netflix or whatever, leading to almost worldwide uniformity. Prophecy students, do you know of a time coming where there is nearly worldwide uniformity? The whole world wondered after the beast, yes? He says the great majority of young people in almost all civilized countries derive their ideas of love, of honor, of the way to make money, and of the importance of good clothes from the evenings spent in seeing what Hollywood thinks good for them. How do the young people develop their value system? As a template given to them from Hollywood. I doubt whether all the churches and schools combined have as much influence as the cinema on the opinions of the young. He's speaking the truth there. The producers of Hollywood are the high priests of a new religion. The result of this system of indoctrination of the youth, these high priests of the new religion, giving the youth their religious faith, a secular faith, the result of that is if there are any defects in the status quo, we got to pause and unpack that. Defects in the status quo. Okay, so you got social engineers. Edward Bernays called them, we are the ones that pull the wires that control the public mind. So you got this social engineering class, ruling class, and they've created, culture creation industry. They've manufactured much of what we perceive as society. Not organically, a lot of it top down. Sometimes it's both. Sometimes it's astroturf, fake grassroots coming up from the bottom. And these two combined form society. And he says if there are defects in the way that we are running things, that's if there are problems, if we're kind of messing people over a little bit, really, then that's going to become known only to those who are willing to spend their leisure time otherwise than in amusement. Did you get it? He's like, the only people who are going to notice that we're kind of messing their kids up are people who do things other than amusement with their leisure time. That's you, because you're here not watching the latest Netflix binge or entertainment sporting event or whatever. And I'm not trying to pat you on the back. It's to God's glory. But any of us who choose meaning, truth, service, substance, reality over the counterfeit reality that the web of Satan is spinning, then we know we can break free from the control, and we can be in this small group, because he says these are a small minority. Whole world wonders after the beast. Almost worldwide uniformity, but you got a small group. We call them biblically the remnant. And those in Babylon who God is calling out, he's got my people. So these are God's people. And they're a small minority. They're at most times negligible. Boy, you can hear the boastfulness in that. They're at most times negligible. They don't matter to the grand scheme of our thing. But there is, however, a certain instability about the whole system. In the event of unsuccessful war, so any sort of news narrative that is going to shock people out of their complacency, of their satisfaction, where they become dissatisfied with something, like an unsuccessful war, this system then might break down. And the population, which had grown accustomed to amusements, might be driven by boredom into serious thought. You can hear the panic and the power elite, like, oh no, the people may begin thinking seriously. Serious thought may transpire in a group larger than the small minority that are at most times negligible, but they might grow. Maybe we've been through in recent years some things that awakened people to the true nature of things around them, made them question the reality that's presented to them. And maybe in the near future, these things will continue, and we are able to hold out the word of life, those three angel messages, to be able to say, this is the answer. In recent years, it's been easier to give the great controversy out than in previous years. Have you noticed? People are wanting to know what's really going on. By the way, before we turn the page on this, he used the word amusements. That's another interesting word, because you know what the word muse means. And what happens when you put the letter A at the beginning of a word? It negates it. Amusement means to not think. That's the whole point, isn't it? It dates back to the Roman Empire. Bread and circuses to keep the masses in a state of being fat, dumb, and happy, compliant, unthinking, and subservient. And I don't say that in revolutionary terms, of course. This is not a civic discourse, much less one promoting any sort of uprising. That would be of the devil, pressure from above, pressure from below, French Revolution, tyranny from the top, papal model. The devil's got all of that world monopolized, so I don't touch that stuff with a 10-foot pole. But what I want to encounter and touch is that scepter that will say to us, you are raised up for such a time as this, brothers and sisters, to present these three angel messages to a world that is ready to receive it, because these crises are happening. And we don't need to just be in a state of amusement, of not thinking. We want to awaken people from that. Now, here are some of the high priests of a new religion. Paul Schrader, a screenwriter, said, we are there to thumb our nose at your values. We don't care if you like us. We don't like you. People think that Hollywood has principles, morals, and values. It doesn't. I appreciate his honesty. I'm not putting him up there to bash him. I actually respect him for leveling with us. To be like, we don't like you. He's speaking to religious people, traditional moral values people. We're thumbing our nose at your values. These are the high priests of a new religion programming this generation. I think I'll say no. I think I'll pass. Movies are powerful. Good or bad, they tinker around inside your brain. They steal up on you in the darkness of the cinema to form or conform social attitudes. In short, cinema is propaganda. This session is actually called, I never gave you the name of this, it's called Conformed to the Counterfeit Reality. Or another name for it is conformed or transformed. What Bible verse am I borrowing that from? Romans 12, verse 2, be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. He just said the whole cinema industry, and beyond that, entertainment across the board, is conforming social attitudes, which is so ironic because when I was a teenager, I thought, I'm a nonconformist because I'm breaking free from some of the conventions and dictates of my hyper-conservative religious upbringing. I'm going to be into all this cool, liberating stuff, and I'm going to watch MTV. I'm going to be an individual and watch MTV. And then I later learned they're trying to own you, bro. Like, you trust this corporate establishment? Why do you think they know how to paint a picture, a veneer of cool, but it's substance. There's no substance. It's all an illusion. There's one more of these guys. He says, I always like to think of it as like, I've got him sitting there. Whip a little message at him. Whip a little moral at him. Whip a little of what my view of the world is. Because that's what, how many? Every good filmmaker does that. And that should be a foregone conclusion. It's not merely entertainment. The industry is there to, as a business, to make their shareholders a bottom line. But in addition to that, the filmmaker himself is an agent of a worldview. He has a belief system. Every artist, especially, uses their form of art to communicate their ideas. So this isn't a shocking statement. What it's a reminder of is, though, that every filmmaker is going to insert their worldview, their value system, or lack thereof. If we don't have values, some of them say, is it this value system? Is it this worldview that's coming through? Far from it. It is contrary to it and anti that. And I give some props to Little Light Studios, Little Light Ministry. Are you familiar with them? They go into these movies and they show how it's an inversion of the biblical narrative. How they make Christ out to be the bad guy and the devil to be the good guy. How they take all of the values and flip them upside down on their head, which doesn't surprise you to hear, does it? I want to turn the gears, switch gears over to the spiritual now. That was kind of the social engineering segment of this afternoon. But really, it's not just human agencies, Edward Bernays and Bertrand Russell and social engineers and corporate elites and all of that. It's the devil himself that is behind all of this. And that's why I want to share with you where these movies came from in the 1920s. Every night, this actor's wife would hold a seance. Now that, already I stopped there and go, whoa, the actor's wife is having a seance how often? Every night. Boy, if I'm not having worship as a family every night, the devil's got a leg up on me. He's got a head start on me. Because their people are having worship every night, calling forth help from the spirit world in her creative undertaking. Then, pencil and paper in hand, she would go into a trance and start writing. After her outpourings were typed up, they were brought to the set the next day and given to the director. Did you know Hollywood films, way back in the good old days, right, before things got so immoral in modern times, 100 years ago, there was not a good old days. This was the origins. This was a conceived in iniquity industry, conceived in demonic iniquity. The scripts were literally coming from the demonic realm through seances. Same thing with Mae West in the 1930s. She received inspiration from psychic phenomenon. Her psychic recalls that she would pace around the room saying, "Forces, forces, come to me and help me write a script." She would begin to hear voices and images as the plot was revealed to her. She would lie in bed in a trance-like state, dictating as the spirits entered. You don't get much more spiritualist than that, do you? In fact, I've read in a book called The Great Controversy that spiritualism would rise going into the last days. And so many proper historians see spiritualism as a phase that we went through in American culture in the late 19th century. And it more or less faded as secularism rose. Think again, it just changed forms. It went from being known as spiritualism to being that very same practice of communicating with spirit entities in the entertainment industry for the last 100 years. For example, modern actors and actresses like Oprah Winfrey. She said, "This is how I see acting. I use my body to be a carrier for the spirits of those who have come before me." She believed that the spirits of the dead could be alive and animated, and in her body would be a carrier for those spirits. those who have come before me, meaning her ancestors. This was stated in the context of a movie about American history, so she would be acting as a historical personage in the antebellum South during the time of slavery. The name of the movie was The Color Purple. She says, I tried to empty myself and let the Spirit inhabit me. I watched that movie in a Christian school in history class and had no idea the actress had said that she is a carrier for spirits who've come before her, and the spirits inhabit her. What do we call that biblically, by the way? When a spirit inhabits somebody, that's possession, friends. This is deadly serious stuff. I used to think it's okay if it's history, right? Why is it okay then just because it's historical events they're recording? It's still the same industry. Peter Sellers said, it's rather like being a medium. He used the actual word, a medium. Acting is like being a medium. Laying yourself wide open and saying, I want a character to inhabit my body, or I want a character to take charge of me so that I can produce what I hope to produce. So you're hearing inhabit me, inhabit my body, lay yourself wide open. Robin Williams actually used the word possession. He says there's also that thing, it is possession. In the old days, you'd be burned for it, but there's something empowering about it. Now, he's talking about literal possession. You might be, oh, these are artists, using some symbolic terminology. In the old days, you'd be burned for it. You didn't get burned for being an actor. You got burned for possession. And so this is literal possession he was dabbling with before he sadly ended his life in suicide. And he said, you really can become this other force. It's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You really can become this other force. It is possession. Now, probably my favorite actor when I was a teenager, tied with maybe two others. Denzel Washington, another history movie. And I love this one. Watch this one in a Christian school too. The interviewer, the journalist, asked him, now, Mr. Washington, you were so in charge in that scene. How did you act so in charge in that scene? And he says, basically what I did was got on my knees and sort of communicated with the spirits. And when I came out, I was in charge. I couldn't have acted that. I couldn't have made a decision to play that part. How were you so in charge? He's like, I couldn't have acted that. What? I couldn't have acted that? Well, yeah, basically what I did was got on my knees, communicated with the spirits. And then I came out onto where the scene was to be recorded, and I couldn't have acted that. I had this in-charge thing going on. I couldn't have made a decision to play that part. He said this multiple times, too, in different interviews. That's me in 1999, a little personal testimony side of the story here. I played in a rock band, just kind of a high school, buddies in the local town. It was nothing big, but, you don't need to watch that anymore. But we're dressed up in this, ghoulish sort of demonic attire because it's Halloween. It's October 31, 1999. And it was a youth group. It was actually, that was at a church. Yeah, they had a barn because they had bought the land, and there was a barn from the old farmhouse. And this was, they'd wired up the barn and put a stage on there to be able to let the young people have their concerts and all their demonic fun at church. So that's my background when I talk about the music industry. Is from somebody who loved this stuff, adored this stuff. It was certainly an idol for me, the music. I didn't know about Aleister Crowley, that he called himself, the BBC called him the wickedest man in the world. He called himself Satan's chief of staff, and he said, you want to become a genius in music through practicing his forms of Satanism. He said he wanted to bring music and an army of youth to bring in the new age and have a secret room with moving mirrors to invoke spirits. I'll come back to that point, but that's his idea in a nutshell was, do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. That's why they say he's really inaugurated modern Satanism in its sort of Church of Satan form, where they say, I will be a God unto myself by making my own rules. I find the truth within, and follow your own desires, follow your own feelings, follow your heart is the message of modern Satanism. This again was warned about in the great controversy in the chapter on spiritualism. And specifically, I want you to notice a few phrases that spiritualism teaches. True knowledge places man above all law. Whatever is right. God doth not condemn. All sins which are committed are innocent. And desire is the highest law. Now, can you remember some of those for a second here? All sins which are committed are innocent. There's no sin. Desire is the highest law. Jay-Z, I live by you, desire. Your love is my scripture. We formed a new religion. no sins in our religion as long as there's permission. They're talking about consensual arrangements of immorality. Love, so-called love, is cursed by monogamy. God's design for marital love in a monogamous heterosexual marriage context. They say that is a curse to their version of love, which is nothing more than lust and licentiousness. And it's something that the pastor don't preach. Does this sound familiar? There are no sins. We live by desire. Didn't we just hear spiritualism will teach that desire is the highest law and that there are no sins? Interesting. The Beatles are the ones that really promoted Crowley the most. They said the whole Beatle idea was to do what you want, right? Do what thou wilt. They quoted Crowley in saying the whole Beatle idea, our worldview, and we put him on the album cover, and we have the whole album themed after 20 years from his death, and we sing Sgt. Pepper Taught the Band to Play 20 years ago today. And this album was released 20 years after the death of Aleister Crowley in 1947. Jimmy Page was another rock and roll artist of the 60s that felt that Crowley was a misunderstood genius of the 20th century because his whole thing was liberation of the person. What you want to do, do it. I've employed his system in my own day-to-day life, and that is the way big names are made these days. So he employed Crowley's system, but he says all the big names are made by adopting Crowleyanism in the music industry. His admirers really were kind of all the big names of the times from the 60s and 70s and 80s. And not all of them were open about it, but these are the ones that were open about it in their devotion to Crowley. And then you get a surprising 80s one, the king of pop. You know, I knew it was rock and roll was Crowley central, but even Michael Jackson said, I have my own secret room with a moving wall and mirrors. That was one of Crowley's methods, yes? That's where I talked to Lee, speaking of Liberace, who was dead at the time. And unfortunately, he was not actually talking to Liberace. He was talking to a demon, didn't know it. His is the voice I hear in there. I feel his presence so very close to me. Jay-Z put do what thou wilt right on the sweatshirt in quotation marks with Old English script. So somebody put the two guys together. I think it's fitting. Then there's, oh, you know what? I'm going to not do that one because that's just goes on forever. It's all these lyrics from the music industry all over the place telling you, listen to your heart, trust your heart, do what you want, do whatever you want to do. It's Crowley all over the place, Satanism all over the place. But that's enough on Crowley. Who's the real musician behind the music? Let me ask you a question. Who's the first musician in the history of the universe? I caught you. Remember, I'm a teacher. There you, no, that's not even right. Oh man, I'm terrible. Trick questions all over the place. Who's the first musician in the history of the universe? God. She's got it. You're with me. Thanks for playing along. Thanks for playing my game. Cruel teachers. But yeah, it was God. God invented music. Because I totally primed you guys for that. Because like, oh, the whole music industry is satanic. And then who's the first musician ever? And we're in that line of thinking. So got to break out of that and go, wait. Slow down. God says, I rejoice over you with singing. God invented music. He gave Lucifer the ability to sing. And then Lucifer and all the angels do all the sacred music. Lucifer falls. He's still Lucifer. He's still that guy. He's just called Satan now. He still knows how to do music. But he does it wrong now, doesn't he? He does it wrong. And he did it through Robert Johnson. This guy invented the rock and roll style guitar. And if you ask his mentor, the blues artist Son House, how he acquired that ability, he said, well, he sold his soul to the devil to be able to play like that. And he just says it matter-of-factly. And the story is actually that he was talentless. Robert Johnson couldn't play worth a lick. He'd get run out of the blues clubs. They didn't want to hear him. They're like, that guy has no talent. But then he left for 6 to 9 months, came back and played in ways that held audiences spellbound with a sound that they had never heard. And it initiated what became Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Elvis, rock and roll. He was the rock and roll guitar artist that invented the sound. And where'd you get the ability to play that 6 to 9 months? Well, it's at the crossroads of 61 and 49 in Clarksdale, Mississippi, where the subsequent musicians of generations later would go and grab some gravel from that and put it in a special emblem as an altar on their mantle. And it's like, this is a place where really it all began with that selling of a soul to the devil, so-called. There really is no such thing as like you're permanently stuck, you're permanently sealed into that arrangement. Like he could have repented. Little Richard repented. Yes. Yeah, you know the story. Let's go right to Little Richard, actually. He's the next slide. Previously, he had said, I was directed and commanded by another power, the power of darkness that a lot of people don't believe exists, the power of the devil, Satan. So he admitted that when he was in that career, even at the time, he was admitting that. And later on, praise God, he said, I renounce all of that. That is not who I am, and I am with Jesus now. And then he died 2 years after doing that. John Lennon said, I felt like a hollow temple filled with many spirits, each one passing through me, each inhabiting me for a little time, and then leaving to be replaced by another. Does that sound like Peter Sellers and Robin Williams and Denzel Washington and these people? Certainly does. Be inhabited by spirits. This is not something that is to be taken lightly. I don't know who the blank writes my songs. I'm just sitting and the whole song comes out. He does. The Beatles, like the most popular music, probably them and Michael Jackson and maybe somebody in the last 20 years, top three for sure. Band or musician of all time. The Beatles. They didn't know who wrote their songs. That's eye-opening, huh? And same thing with the Rolling Stones. Songs, yeah, they think you wrote it. Really, you are just a medium, like being at a seance. Songs come to me en masse. I didn't do anything except to happen to have been awake when it arrived. So these guys did not know who wrote their songs. Same thing with Jimmy Page and Robert Plant of Led Zeppelin. They explained how they received the song Stairway to Heaven and other music, referring to themselves as a musical medium. They said they were channeling the music. The music was offered to them. And Robert Plant specifically said, my hand started writing. I almost leapt out of my seat. Okay, that's the occult, automatic writing and channeling. It happens to us quite often. It feels as though I'm not playing my instrument. Something else is playing it, and that same thing is playing all three of our instruments. That's what I mean when I say it's frightening sometimes. We'll all play the same phrase out of nowhere. It happens very often with us. Beyonce said, when I see a video of myself on stage or TV, I'm like, who is that girl? That's not me. I wouldn't dare do that. I created my stage persona to protect myself. That's on the left, Sasha Fierce is this alter ego, devil horns, dark eye makeup, goat imagery. So it's over on the right. And then on the left, it's her with the cross hanging from her wrist. So she's got this alter ego, a persona. She says, I created that stage persona to protect myself so that when I go home, I don't have to think about what it is I do. Sasha is not me. I wouldn't like Sasha if I met her off stage. She says, I have someone else that takes over when I'm on stage. When I'm on stage, I'm not afraid of my sexuality. The tone of my voice gets different. I'm fearless. I'm just a different person. Things I do when performing, I would never do normally. I have out-of-body experiences. If I cut my leg, if I fall, I don't even feel it. I'm not aware of my face or my body. That's not normal, is it? To not be aware of your face or body, to be out of your body, you're not actually out of your body, but to have these experiences where you don't even feel yourself getting cut. She says, I have someone else that takes over when I'm on stage. Pray for these people. She put the ring on with the goat god Baphomet right there, and you can see when you do that or do his eye symbolism. She did the triangle, the eye inside the triangle symbol there. And I remember this was at the Super Bowl, which Madonna the previous year had called the Holy of Holies of American culture. Madonna, the high priestess of the music industry, she had said, I'm going to come in at the halfway point of the church experience, and I will deliver the sermon. That was what Madonna called the halftime show, the sermon of the church experience. So the church experience is the Super Bowl, the Holy of Holies of American culture. So Beyonce does it the next year, does this, and kind of the conspiracy-minded people are ready to pounce. They're like, oh, there it is, the all-seeing eye. And I remember the media going, oh, you silly people. All she's doing is promoting her husband's record company. But then doesn't that just beg the question, why is he using the symbol? It just kind of kicks the can one notch over to ask the question, what's going on with all the pointing to the eye and covering of the eye and all these major artists that started doing this about 25 years ago? It became the big thing. Well, Carlos Santana blew the lid off of this with Rolling Stone magazine when in an interview, a journalist asked him about his spiritual experiences, and he said, in my meditations, the entity called Metatron said, can you believe you're just reading this in a magazine? In my meditations, the entity called Metatron said, okay, what did he say? This demon spoke to him and said, we want to hook you back to the radio airwave frequency to reach junior high schools, and universities. So young people, you are the target. You're the primary target because you're the future. Once you reach them, we want you to present them with a new form of existence. Fast forward 1 year to the next issue. Metatron is represented by the eye inside the triangle who wants listeners to, in Santana's words, remember your divinity. Brothers and sisters, do you have divinity? No. God has divinity. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, divinity, divinity, divinity. Me? No. I partake of the divine nature through very great and precious promises, Peter tells us. But I'm not God. That's I will ascend. I will be in the position of God. You will be like God, eating of this, no good and evil. This is a lie of the devil. It's the same lie of the devil that he started with 6,000 years ago. And that's what they want the young people to believe about themselves, that do what thou wilt. You are your own God, all of these lies. Now, probably nobody was surprised by those people on the screen. Like they're trying to be evil and, into the dark, weird psychedelic culture of drug, rock, and all of that madness. Now, I have two up there that I didn't bring up yet. So under this new heading, and we thought they were okay. We need to shift gears here because probably nobody walked in thinking Jay-Z was okay for the Christian. Yeah, I know that he's openly, deliberately rebellious. And same thing with Black Sabbath, right? Not many Seventh-day Adventists go to church on Sabbath listening to Black Sabbath in their car. But so this is just kind of, so we understand the culture. But what might be more applicable to us who are here today is we might think, well, maybe since there's those openly demonic artists and entertainers and actors and musicians, there might be a subcategory of entertainment industry that's acceptable. It's like, worldly light. And I'm okay with it because it's not as bad as the alternative. Well, that's just the devil. He's going to widen the Overton window. Are you familiar with this concept? So if culture was like this, and this was the worst thing, and your average moderated, traditional-minded person might kind of land about here, and it's decent, and it's not that big a deal, right? Now, we want to go all the way here, but this is how he's going to drag the whole culture into the abyss. What he does is this side, he just extends this out and makes it, order of magnitude greater extremity of evil. So then if you're wanting to find, say, the 25% mark, you just moved from here to here and you didn't even notice it. You're still 25% in. You're still, better than 75% of the consumption out there. The Overton window has been widened. Now, I want to not follow that, so I want to be careful and see how about these worldly light options. You know who two people were that were very much into Aleister Crowley? Sammy Davis Jr. and Sting. Now, Sting I remember hearing at the dentist office in polite company. It's on the light rock station, yes? So it's okay then, right? Be careful with that. He was just as into Aleister Crowley as the other guys on the screen. Sammy Davis Jr., even more into Aleister Crowley than maybe anybody but Ozzy Osbourne on the screen. He looks like he's singing special music at church, doesn't he? It seems totally innocent, yes, but do what thou wilt comes in many packages, like even the very refined and polished Frank Sinatra. I Did It My Way was the most satanic song of the 20th century, according to Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan. Whew, man, that's interesting. Then there's this quote. This is from a generation where the music was deliberately rebellious, but there was this group that was perceived as not so. But then you read their interviews and they say things like, we were doing witchcraft, trying to do witchcraft music. I'm doing the spiritual sound, a white spiritual sound, religious music. That's the whole movement. That's where I'm going. It's going to scare a lot of people. So who was this into white witchcraft, talking about how that's not a racial, it's just a brand of witchcraft. It's all dark. It's all evil. Who was such an evil doer? Was it Marilyn Manson? Was it Metallica? I hope you don't even know who they are. That would be a blessing. Nope. It was the Beach Boys. Singing pretty harmonies, going to the beach, going surfing, clean-cut guys. They look so innocent. They were doing witchcraft. Okay, then in the 90s, I'm listening to Nirvana and punk rock and Snoop Dogg, hip-hop, and all the garbage in the 90s. The good Christian girls at my school who weren't into the look were trying to be nice kids, but they also wanted to have some cool, fun music, just like all the young people seem to think they need, and older people for that matter. Tori Amos was one of the ones that those girls were listening to. I remember it like it was yesterday. And then I found this quote where she says, I wanted to marry Lucifer. She has a song called Father Lucifer, and she says in an interview, I wanted to marry Lucifer. I don't consider Lucifer an evil force. I feel his presence with the music. I feel like he comes and sits on my piano. No comment needed there, huh? Sarah McLachlan was another one of that same variety. She sang a song called In the Arms of the Angel, but you might wonder which angel is she singing about. She says, I think the devil has gotten a bad rap. The devil is the fallen angel, the one who was willing to embrace the dark side, whereas all the other angels were in total denial. The devil is more like us. That is some convoluted reasoning. Since he's like us, that makes him good. But maybe we're not good when we're on the dark side. Yes? I mean, let's back up a step and think this through. But she thinks the devil's just gotten a bad reputation. She knows about the great controversy. She knows that there's accusations being thrown around, but she's like, oh, it's been unfair what's been said about the devil. Wow. Okay, the next one is probably the biggest surprise, and it takes us back into the movies and TV shows. And this is, what you're about to see is from a decade that's known and perceived as being, and probably legitimately is, the most morally innocuous, the least morally dark of the post-World War II era. What decade would you think that is, history students? The 1950s. Yeah, the 60s you end up with Woodstock and all of that. But the 50s, come on, that's sitcoms like Father Knows Best and Little Beaver Cleaver and Ward Cleaver, these good fathers. And you get little Timmy and Lassie learning life lessons and coming of age. Oh, man, what an idyllic period, the 1950s. Let's all watch 1950s sitcoms. And then you'll notice there's a seance in the scene in I Love Lucy. Well, how did Lucille Ball make a decision to be the star of I Love Lucy? It was the spirit of actress Carole Lombard who guided Lucille Ball into taking a chance and accepting the offer to star in I Love Lucy. True or false? The spirit of actress Carole Lombard, who had died in an airplane crash in 1942, appeared to Lucy in 1951. True or false? Sorry, that was a long question. True or false? Carole Lombard appeared to Lucy while dead. False. That's the dead know not anything. This was a false appearance, a manifestation of a familiar spirit. And because Lucille Ball accepted the spirit's urging to take a chance, honey, she made television history. So she took advice from a demon impersonating her dead friend and said, you should be the star in I Love Lucy instead of being in the movies on the silver screen. You should go down to this newfangled device called a television and be in a sitcom, which seemed like a demotion in her career path, because this silly fly-by-night television thing isn't going to last, some skeptics said. It didn't have the prestige that Hollywood on the big screen had. But can I take you one more notch deeper into, and we thought they were okay? Everybody thought the 1950s, oh man, that's the best time with moral values. Okay, it's relatively good, but it's still the world, right? If any man loves the world, it's the devil's territory. He was just doing a little bait and switch. He was doing a little frog in the pot there, yes? But then, Disney. Oh, are you going to really go there, Brother Ritsema? Do you have to? I do. Because God loves you. And there was this movie that I loved when I was a kid. It was like the beginnings of the Disney cartoon movies. There was Little Mermaid. That one came out, and I enjoyed that with my older sister and never admitted to my buddies that I actually liked it because it was kind of girly. But then came Aladdin, and this was like, this cool guy is jumping around this way and that and stealing food, and you're like, yeah, go get the... I'm rooting for the thief. It never dawned on me. I'm rooting for the thief here. And he woos the heart of Jasmine away from her father, who is the king. Think symbolically here with me for a second. The daughter of the king is being wooed away to go with the one who is a professional thief, who is the one that comes only to steal and kill and destroy. Yes, maybe Satan figure here. Let's read on and see what happens next. They go out on this fanciful magic carpet ride. She's away from her father's authority rebelliously, and he sings to her, no one to tell us no or where to go. This is just Aleister Crowley, isn't it? With a glittery, happy, princessy Disney overlay. He also sings to her, before I tell you this, he takes her on this magic carpet. And already at magic, we should go, red flag, No Harry Potter, no magic. We don't do the magic. Magic is of the devil. Magic arts are outside the city. Those who practice witchcraft. They were stoned in the Old Testament. In Revelation, it's condemnation. We don't do witchcraft, obviously, right? But when it's Disney, I don't know. We let them get away with it. It's because Disney. Come on, let's be objective here. But he goes up at a high elevation. He sings the words to her. I can show you the world. You're already getting it, aren't you? It gets even better. I can show you the world shining, shimmering, splendid. Who in their Bibles can remember where somebody took somebody on a high elevation, showed him the world in its splendor? I can show you the world, and it's splendid. And Satan took Jesus up on a high mountain, showed him the world in its splendor, word for word. I don't know if the songwriters knew what they were doing, or if this is demonically inspired, or if this is like one in a bazillion coincidence that it would be word for word from Matthew 4, and that more things would happen in the same song. He takes her above the clouds. Who said, I will ascend above the clouds? Lucifer in Isaiah 14 said, I will ascend above the clouds. Then look at these words from the song. I'm like a shooting star. Stars in the Bible represent angels. Shooting star, would that be one that fell from heaven or stayed in heaven? I'm like a shooting star. I've come so far, I can't go back to where I used to be. This is all in one song. That is a description of Satan's fall, and he can't return to heaven. Then the clincher that made me go, okay, I have to share these slides and quotes and leave people free to decide. I would never venture to tell anybody what to conclude, but you look at the evidence, think about it for yourself. Is this a coincidence? All of this combined in one song. He swoops down into a garden. He plucks a piece of fruit. He hands it to Eve. I'm sorry, Jasmine is her name, not Eve. I don't know how I make that mistake every time, but okay, but that's not it. I mean, that's enough right there. That's all I need. And then there was all the other stuff. And then he sings to her, I can open your eyes. Yeah, Genesis 3, your eyes will be open, knowing good and evil. And then Elsa comes along and just in your face, there's no right, no wrong, no rules for me, I'm free. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. But where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is the Lord and his law. There's no right, no wrong, no rules for me. I'm free. That is a lie of the devil. Now, as we cruise to the end here, I want to use an analogy and a story and a Bible story and a scripture and maybe one more thing too. So when you have a visiting speaker, oftentimes the conclusion will be, a substantial portion of the message. It'll be conclusion part A, part B, part C, and part D. So the conclusion will last a little bit here, but we will be wrapping up. So I'm taking you now to a buffet. You go to your favorite buffet. They put out all kinds of items for you to choose from at the buffet. You take your family to the buffet for dinner, and you know that many of the items on there are not for your family's consumption, and everybody's on board. Well, of course, avoid that one and that one and that one. This is what most conscientious Christian families have done as they've engaged with the entertainment industry. They've said, we're aware that a lot of this is not good, but there's also some decent stuff as well. And I think that is a reasonable thing to have done until you've learned a lot of this, because what we're about to experience is this. You take something that and we thought they were okay and place it on the plate, and this hypothetical funny scenario, somebody comes and taps you on the shoulder and they go, hey, I'm from the kitchen, and I see you've just added some spinach to your plate. By the way, whoever provided the greens today at lunch, thank you for that. That was very tasty. And they say, I put poison in the spinach. Ha, 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 ha. And he ran away and went to the kitchen. I know it's a weird analogy, sorry. Okay, you're like, okay, no spinach, weird. All right, family, no spinach. But okay, I'm going to get the carrot dish here and the sweet potatoes. And hey, I'm from the kitchen. You see the sweet potatoes? I put poison in it. I made it. Ha ha. And he goes back to the kitchen. And you're learning that some of the things you thought were okay are full of poison too. And then like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 people are coming up. And you're like, okay, I'm taking notes. But now you're starting to question the rest of the buffet, yes? And the kids are yanking on mom's skirt saying, can we get out of here? This place is crazy. But dad's like, nobody said potato salad. And that was going to be my entree. Nobody said potato salad. Okay, family meeting. Who wants to leave? You know, half of the family's like, oh, but I got my eye on the pizza and they didn't say pizza. And while you're having the family meeting, deciding whether the end we thought they were okay segment was sufficient for our departure altogether from the buffet, somebody comes from the kitchen. Her name is Fairuza Balk. She's pictured top left there. And she was in a movie about witchcraft called The Craft. And she comes out and taps you on the shoulder, and she's like, hey, I know a lot of the cooks, that people that made this dish and that dish and that dish and that dish. And I'm here to tell you a lot of actors who don't mention their names, of course, are very much into this meaning witchcraft. So you're telling me a lot of the buffet, but you're not going to say which is, come on, at least give me 2 or 3 that are guaranteed. No, you're telling me a lot. Oh, hey, maybe I was working in the wrong paradigm altogether here. Maybe I need to go back to Genesis, where God said to Adam and Eve, do you see all of these trees, this wide variety of wonderful provision for you? There's just that one over there. You don't want to eat from that one. Trust me. But of all of the trees of the garden, you may freely eat. When I think this is the everything garden, I'm looking in the wrong place. I'm looking with blinders at the one. I'm looking at different branches of the one I don't need to be eating from. But God says, come over here. I'm not going to withhold from you any good thing from those who walk uprightly, says the psalmist. He has a better way for us than the devil. Do you remember this morning how the more media we consume, the less happy we are and the more bored we are? Satan's not better at pleasure than God is. Pleasure seeking leads to less pleasure. Living life God's way leads to more pleasure and fulfillment and joy and eternal life. Saying no to this is not limiting me. It's opening up the wider horizons that were there all along that I never acknowledged. I'm speaking of my personal testimony here. This was my world. And on a dietary analogy, I was eating the garbage food and didn't eat the good, healthy stuff. And when I gave up that and started on this, I'm like, there's so much variety over here. I enjoy food more than I ever did here. And back to the topic, I enjoy life more post-entertainment than when I was captured by that industry, controlled thoughts, mind, manipulated systems of captivity. God wants to free us today. But it takes an action on our part, and that action requires not a fast from poison. Does anybody know somebody who's on a fast from poison right now? You're like, there's no such thing, because you just don't eat it ever again when you realize what it is. And I leave that between each person in their walk with God to make that decision as He leads. And to make a fast decision, too, from this morning as we close out the program. Maybe there are some things that, aren't necessarily morally problematic. They're not necessarily the world, but they might be overstimulating. They might be occupying time. They might be addictive. I might be harming my mental health, my real relationships, this relationship, by obsessing on that. But if it's this, it's definitely harming my relationship with God, because that is the devil's territory. We do not want to step a foot on that. Don't even go over near the tree. Don't even touch it. And I recommend that we throw things away and get them out of our houses. I really do. There was a pastor. I told you I had an analogy, a story, a Bible story, and a scripture. The pastor, he goes on an airplane, and he sits down, and the guy next to him, he starts up a conversation like you can do. And the guy, he says, oh, hey, what do you do for a living? And the guy goes, oh, I practice witchcraft. Oh, that's an interesting conversation starter right there. What do you do? I'm a pastor. Okay. Well, what would you say to the guy? I would be like, well, how does a witch make money? Like, how do you make a living being a witch? He goes, well, the most lucrative line of work is arranging for adulterous affairs. A man will come to me desiring a woman who's married, and he will pay me money, and we will do our spells and our demonic whatever to get her to leave her husband and go with this man instead. Terrible, diabolical. The pastor says, you wouldn't be able to affect my wife and I with your magic, because we are Christians, and we have the protection of the Most High God. Now the witch says back to him, it's a true story. I heard this from this pastor. The witch says to him, you know what? We get Christians all the time, actually. I'm not saying I'm going to do it to you, but you're wrong. So now this little debate is on. The pastor's like, I promise we're different. It's not in us. It's greater is he that is in us than he that is in the world. And the witch says, okay, let me ask you a few questions. And you can tell he's had this conversation before. He says to the Christian, okay, tell me about what you and your wife watch, listen to, read, what's in your home. Yeah, he's interrogating him about his media and their literary consumption and music. And the pastor answers in a very consecrated way. Like, our home has been purged of anything of the world. We have sacred music. We have videos of, sermons or good things, informational, true, good, beautiful, lovely, admirable, excellent, praiseworthy. Same thing with our books and magazines. She doesn't read that kind of trashy novel, that kind of magazine. Nope. He also asks the pastor, do you have any secret sins? And the pastor says, I can't claim that I've lived a sinless life, but I can say that when I've messed up, I take it to the Lord in confession, and I repent of it, and I have the righteousness of Christ. So no, I do not live a life of secret sin. The witch can't believe what he's hearing. He's like, nobody's ever answered me that way. That's why I was so confident, because we get Christians all the time, because they don't answer me the way you did, because they don't have a home that has been purged of all these things. We have access to Christian homes through the media in their homes. Isn't that something? That was heavy. When I heard that, I was like, and I don't want to make decisions based on that story. That story just illustrates what we know from the Bible. And that is James 4, 7, and 8. We don't need to be afraid of the devil. We don't need to be afraid of the devil. He is a whimpering little kitten compared to the mighty Lion of Judah. And so we can claim James 4, verse 8, which says, resist the devil and he will flee from you. But some people, presently, contemporarily, and historically, have claimed these promises and not had the effect. Do you remember the 7 sons of Sceva? Okay, you know the story. In the name of Jesus whom Paul preaches, come out of him. And the demon-possessed man, the demon mocks these 7 sons of Sceva, beats them up, and rips their clothes off of them. What did they not have? They didn't actually have the power of God in their life, because it was the Jesus that Paul knows. They didn't have verse 7. What is verse 7? Submit yourselves therefore to God. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. You see the condition? What do I mean condition? Let me ask you this. Is God's love unconditional? Absolutely yes. He is love. He can't but be love toward us. Is the protection of his angels unconditional? Submit yourselves therefore to God. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. When we are in submission to God, we have that power. Now, God still does intervene with his angels at times when we don't, when we're not in harmony with him. But we can't run around claiming the name of Jesus, which is a heavy claim, if we don't have the true faith of Jesus. And I'm not preaching at anybody with that. I'm just stating Bible facts that I've got to hear too. I want to know that I'm right with God, that I've confessed my sins, that I recognize his righteousness, and in so doing, I am in submission to him. So his protection is conditional. Those guys sure didn't get the protection, did they? Because they didn't know Jesus. They had rejected him in whatever way in their lives, I don't know. But I want to not do that. I want to cleanse and purify the home environment that I'm raising my children in, and confess all my sins, and bring my children to the family altar as well, and have that morning and evening worship. And that is a home in which angels delight to dwell. And it's not that God is holding out on us and we have to perform and we have to please him in order for him to be nice to us. That's not what I'm getting at here. This is just how the great controversy works. Because Satan made accusations about God being a controlling, dictatorial God, God so values freedom that when we are taking the devil's side, we kind of tie his hands. It doesn't mean he's not powerful enough. It means that he's playing by certain rules in this to vindicate his character, to allow the devil to manifest the weeds in the midst of the wheat, the tares in the midst of the wheat. So you understand the great controversy theme. You understand the nature of these conflicts between holy and evil angels. So may we go from here with a commitment to say, Lord, you just love me so much. And that's what motivates me to say yes, to say no to this and yes to your ways. You've provided more than I could ever need. I think we've got somebody else that will close the program out. And I just encourage you to set a time right now to pray about this with a family member, to make a decision today. You know, as Hebrews says, while it is still called today, before the sun goes down tonight, on this Sabbath day, make a decision about a fast, the morning content, about various different forms of media, and then definitely about this, about cleansing spiritually our homes. I pray that you'd make a decision according to God's will, not yours or mine. God bless you all.